Hi, everyone. You should be able to hear me now, so please say in the chat whether you can hear me and see me. We've run through all the tests, and even though there's some noise from the highway, I think you should be able to. To hear me fine. There's this is a fancy camera, so it does it does auto zoom. So I think sometimes I might get fuzzy if I move, if I move out and then it decides to focus on something behind me. But cool, I see that everybody says that they can see me and hear me. So welcome. This is super exciting. We already have almost 50 people here, and still people are joining through the community. So I think we can expect maybe a couple dozen more. And I really like how diverse, the geography here is. It's pretty incredible. People from all over. So awesome. So today we're going to talk about design sprints for impact. And I have a deck for that. So let me see if I can share the screen with my deck. Great. But before we dive too much in to the topic, I want to give you a little bit of information about the system that we're in. This window, Crowdcast, there's a central area where you can see me and my deck. This is just for me, my presentation, and if I bring someone online on the air to do an exercise, but most of you are safe in chat. So if you haven't used Crowdcast before, don't worry about it. You can yell at your kids, or you can do whatever. We can't see you, we can't hear you. The only way most of you will be communicating with the rest of us is through the chat. And there's also a couple of extra features that you should know about. There's questions, there's ask a question below, and there's polls. And so I think essentially that's it. Let me see if I can, yeah, so the polls there's a couple of polls that we put in there that you can answer. So I see that, for instance, I asked, how would you define your role? Most of you said design or product, a few strategy and consulting people. So that's great. And then background about the sprint. Most of you have heard about sprints, but haven't, you don't run design sprints routinely, but there's a few who run sprints routinely. So I'd appreciate it if you kind of answered, take a second to answer the polls, because that helps us tailor the talk better. And then ask a question is where you can ask something of me, and other people can vote on it. And then we are going to go, every once in a while, I'm going to stop and check the questions queue, and I'm going to answer a few from the top. So it's a good, and feel free to ask throughout the event, no problem. Once in a while, I'll make a stop and address them. So hi, everyone. So first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Eran Dror. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Remake Labs, or Remake. And I've lived in New York even though I'm Israeli, and right now I'm in Tel Aviv. I've lived in New York for about a decade, worked for a few startups there. Gust is a startup that still exists today, which kind of connects investors, angel investors, VCs with entrepreneurs. It's a set of tools for early stage investments. SetGem was the next company I was head of product at. They built smart TV interfaces, like a really cool visual smart TV thing. And then we got acquired by Motorola. And essentially ever since then, I've been working mostly with startups, helping them create the first version of their product, their MVP. And recently been falling in love in the past few years, been falling in love with design sprints and doing it mostly through design sprints. I also wrote this book which I don't know if you can read, but this is called The Book of Hard Truths, and it has 16 hard truths about life that we should just accept. And the first one, I don't know if you can read this, is you're going to die, and it only gets better from there. To give you a sense of my consulting personality. And then this article came out, I think the same year that the book came out. Can You Face the 6 Hard Truths of Entrepreneurship was one of the most shared articles that year for entrepreneur.com. So that was pretty cool. And I'm also finishing these days a master's thesis on AI safety from a Buddhist perspective. So looking at what does Buddhist philosophy have to say about building safe and useful and beneficial AI that doesn't kill us. And so just so you know that I'm weird and I have all of these strange interests. But this is the company that I'm speaking for today, my company. And what we do is sprinting. And we do it both in for-profit situations for big companies, small companies, startups, where the purpose is a product that needs to, be used and, gain traction and make money. But also with nonprofits and academic institutions, I'll mention maybe a couple, where the goal is to have an impact or solve big problems. And the process is essentially the same. So we have about 2 hours together, and we're going to cover three things. One is I'm going to kind of introduce you to design sprint. So what's a design sprint? Why should you care? 2, I'm going to cover sprints for impact specifically. So impact is an interesting word because it's not necessarily nonprofit. Impact is a project, whether profit or not, that is aimed at social, social impact, making the world a better place. But usually now the term impact refers to startups and companies that are trying to make a profit, but are geared towards social good. And then I explain how sprints kind of fit into that world, which I think they really do. And then I'm going to give you a taste of the sprint. So the whole last section of this webinar is going to be us actually running a simulated sprint. And I think it'll be pretty cool. So a few words on focus. So the next book after they wrote the book Sprint, that Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky wrote, is Make Time, which is all about focus and all about making time to do the work that matters, the deep work every day. And I think the reason why I bring this up is this is definitely the kind of webinar that you would gain a lot more from if you manage to clear out distractions and actually engage with the exercises. Not only it's going to be more fun for all of us, but you're actually going to understand much more the impact, and we're going to have a better experience, better example, and you're going to learn more on how to run a sprint. In terms of setting expectations, you're not going to be able to facilitate a sprint just based on this 2-hour webinar, but you will know what is a sprint. You will know, essentially what it's composed of, how does it work and why. You will know what projects it's suitable for, and you'll know how to get started. So we're going to give you tools to get started if you want to run sprints in your organization. So that's my hope for today. By the way, I could do like more of a split screen, or I could do a big presentation, small me. I wonder what people prefer. So if you have a strong preference for one or the other, let me know. I'll stay here for now. So what's a design sprint, right? So design sprint is a 5-day process which allows 3 to 10 people to solve large problems and test new ideas together. And I highlighted the together because I think it's really about the together. It's really about multiple minds collaborating on one problem and producing an integrated and good result at the end. So to me, this is the key. And if you look at it kind of like an arc of a story, the idea is you come in with an idea, and through many steps and exercises, you reach to a point where you have a prototype, a realistic prototype. And then at the end, you have a full day for user testing. So from idea to a tested prototype and a lot of user feedback on that prototype. So far it looks like, okay, so fine. So if it's a detailed slide, I will focus on the slide. Most of them are pretty large type and pretty simple. Cool. So this is what it looks like in an ordinary day. In non-corona times, we're all in the same room. We write on sticky notes. We wireframe on the whiteboard. We wireframe on paper. It's a very physical process, and presence is really important. During corona times, everybody, of course, is moving online, and we use a tool called Miro, which is kind of like an infinite whiteboard in Canvas, where we essentially create spaces inside of Miro for each one of the exercises. And it's fully collaborative. It's kind of like a Google Doc. So we really like Miro. But of course, nothing beats full. So I'll focus on this. So it looks like most people prefer split. So I'll just move in between, in and out. Unfortunately, I can't give you the choice. It's I'm the director in this tool. So this is Miro, right? This is our template in Miro, and all the different exercises. And you have sticky notes inside, and you have places to sketch, and everything kind of works just like the physical sprints, except it's virtual. And we use this in conjunction with Zoom. So it all started at Google with Jake Knapp, and Jake was a product designer. He started at Microsoft. Then he came into Google, and he was one of the product designers at Gmail. And he was also working on this thing called Google Hangouts. And basically, they have this idea for a meeting software to run in your browser where you can send someone a link to join a meeting. And it was very immediate and very easy. But the project was stuck for a very long time. And so at some point, because of politics, because of there's too many stakeholders, at some point Jake said, okay, I had enough. And he flew to Stockholm, where the technical team for this project was. And he basically cleared a week to be in Stockholm with the team. And because he was coming from San Francisco, they cleared a week to be with him, and he cleared a week to be with them. And they were just sitting together in the office for a whole day, no interruptions, no meetings. And at the end of that week, the alpha version, the first version of Google Hangout, was out and working. And not only was it out and working, people inside of Google liked it so much that they already started using it in meetings. And so really from that point on, after a very long delay of probably years, in a week, you already had something, and something really started. So Jake really stopped to think and said, wow, this was probably the best week of my career in terms of productivity. And how can we have every week be more like that perfect week? And so he started looking at the world of design thinking and product design and UX and design critique, and kind of thinking about all the best practices for decision making, for design, and started running these sprints all over Google. So it's probably about 100 different projects. And he says back in the day, there were probably about 50 designers in all of Google. So when he walked around offering people a week of design, they jumped on the opportunity. So he got to really experiment with the process, running it at every project you can think of, from Gmail and Google Hangouts, search, Android, what have you, calendar, Google Docs, what have you. He sat with many different teams to run design sprints. And after a while of doing that, he got snatched into or brought into Google Ventures, which I think is Google's investment arm. So I think most of you probably know it. And they continue to run it with another 150 startups. And There's some other really smart design partners on there who are the co-authors of the book, and they really helped him hone the process and adapt it to startups and to testing the kind of key assumptions of startups. And they ran it with many, many famous startups. We'll mention a couple maybe, but Slack, Medium, Blue Bottle Coffee, Nest, many, many, many famous startups that had at a key moment run a design sprint with the Google Ventures team. And in 2016, the book was published and became a fairly quick bestseller. And ever since then, it's sort of exploded. So you can see, in many of these famous companies, I'm going to focus on these just in case you can't read all of them, but these are just a few of the companies that we know today routinely run design sprints, either in key moments or every couple of weeks. And it's interesting to see these are not just the usual suspects, not just big tech companies, but a company like Nestle, a company like Blue Bottle Coffee, a company like Lego. So Lego is really interesting because they start every new product with a design sprint. There's also Wells Fargo, which is a bank. So many, many, many different types of companies. And we also see the large consultants all kind of fall in love with this process. If you look at EY, Deloitte, which are kind of traditional consulting companies, they all have like sprint offerings. IDEO, which is a legendary design company that designed the first Mac together with Apple, they started running design sprints. And McKinsey offered this new, they have the McKinsey sprint, the McKinsey concept sprint, which I read everything I could find about it. It looks essentially exactly the same as in the book. They just changed the names for everything so that you can't really tell, and they don't really give a lot of credit. So hopefully there's nobody from McKinsey here, but McKinsey has it as a service to their clients. VCs are also starting to pay attention to this process. So all of these VCs have invested in design or brought on design partners, and many of them, if they're not running exactly the sprint, they're designing kind of their own process or taking bits and pieces of the sprint to run workshops with their portfolio companies. So I think it's really interesting. So I'll tell you now a little bit about the structure, and then in the second part, we're really going to dive in and really get a sense of what these things are and more granularity. But overall, every day is kind of meant for a different purpose, a different step in the design process. So the first day, which is Monday, we're going to choose a goal for the whole sprint. So we start by interviewing experts, and we end up mapping the challenge and really kind of trying to figure out where do we want to focus our energy for the next week. So what are the key challenges, etc. And this is what the wall might look like. This is from a sprint we did in America. After a couple of interviews, they already have like a whole wall filled with sticky notes with categories broken down. On Tuesday, we generate as many ideas as possible. So in the theory of design thinking, you want to have divergence first and then convergence. So we're not focusing on one idea. We're creating as many ideas as possible. And we do this through kind of a set of exercises. So we start with lightning demos. We all research products. This is from a sprint we did in London. We all find products that are relevant, maybe solve a similar problem in a different industry, or maybe they're competitors and we need to be aware of what they did. But we try to find things for inspiration, and we get 3 minutes each for each product, for each demo, to show it to the rest of the team. And it's meant to generate excitement. Then we have a sketching session. So the whole second part of the day is a structured sketching session in which each person develops their own ideas and sketches them out. So this is Tuesday. Wednesday is a day of convergence. So Wednesday is all about voting and filtering down the ideas and focusing and kind of figuring out what works in everyone's ideas and how can we combine them. And So it's all about kind of heat map voting. We're voting on these sketches, and then we start storyboarding. So we actually create the wireframes on a whiteboard to be as exact as possible for the prototype that we're going to do. Thursday is a full day of prototyping. So morning till evening, we're working on making this prototype as realistic as possible. So, I don't know how much people here know, but this little video, which is it's a little bit jittery when I share it here, but it's totally smooth and realistic, shows you what can be done today with a prototyping tool like InVision. But there's many other prototyping tools today, which can essentially create apps that are indistinguishable from the real thing. I mean, you need to invest in it a little bit to make it this pretty, but there's many prototyping tools today, so it's relatively easy to, at least in software, to completely fake it. And then Friday is a whole day for a test with users. So we take the prototype, we put it in front of at least 5 users, sometimes as many as 10. And we let them walk through and we figure out what works, what doesn't work. And we try to answer the key questions that we define on the first day. And at the end, we kind of review it and we have kind of a discussion about what worked, what didn't work. And we kind of derive our next steps from that. So this is the sprint structure. So yes, this is what the test looks like. This is the sprint structure. It's much more granular than that. There's actually probably about 20 plus exercises in this week, but they all fall into these categories of what do you do when you interview experts and how do you map it and how do you choose the challenges, etc. So why did the sprint, I see a couple of questions. So before I dive in, let me see. Is this being recorded and will it be shared afterwards? So the answer is, it is being recorded. The recording will be available in the community afterwards. So yeah, you can watch it later. Anyone who has access to this thing will have access to this recording. And let me see this. So this is answered. Will you share your presentation? Yes, I will also share my presentation of this again in the community. And what is the profile of the people that would be expected to attend the sprint? We'll get to this. This is definitely part of the next few slides. Okay. So good. I like answering questions in the middle so that people don't hold on to them for too long. So why did the sprint catch on so quickly, right? So I usually say because coming up with new and desirable solutions or products is insanely hard. And especially if we're thinking about trying to make an impact on the world, that is challenging at the very least. So the world is full of wicked problems. A wicked problem is a problem with incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements. The requirements that are often difficult to recognize or agree on, and that where everybody has their own view into it. And if you look at the world of impact, a lot of people talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs from the UN. So if you look at what these goals are, quality education, what does that mean, right? It's not something that you can put an engineer on to just solve quality education. Many of these goals are actually wicked goals, and this is because of a few qualities that the world has, right? The world is super complex. So this is like the sea ecosystem in a specific part of the ocean. These are the different relationships between different countries and parties in the Middle East on the right. The world is also dynamic. So you try to solve a problem, but the world keeps changing as you're trying to solve it. So it's actually super hard to come up with the right solution in time. It's also non-linear. So a lot of the problems we're struggling with are not progressing in the way we expect. They keep accelerating. And so not only are they keep moving, but they keep moving faster and faster. And a lot of things are super dependent on each other. So for instance, I think one of these is, the connection between poverty and segregation, and so all of these interrelationships between cause and effect, that where you look at it and it's kind of a web of causes, and there's no one thing you can do that will solve the problem, because other things will kind of have a feedback and kind of compensate. So you have to really find ways to disrupt the system that are not so obvious. And with all of these said about the world, human language is quite the opposite. So if you have meetings that didn't go well, why is that? The human language is really simplistic. So we often use exactly the same word to describe vastly different phenomena. It's what I call separatist, which is, we have a word for Germany, but do we remember that Germany is an inherent part of Europe? It doesn't work without Europe. If you took Germany out of Europe, first of all, it's completely meaningless to say that, because there's German people all over the world. So where do you draw the line? And it only exists in kind of the context of Europe, in the context of the world, in the context of humanity, and it's interdependent. It's the flows of people and goods, and and the same is true with ourselves, of course. So words are very good at separating things, but they're not very good at remembering the interconnections. It's also very narrow and linear. It's really great at pointing fingers, right? So you can say Rob robbed the bank. But do you remember that only came after the bank robbed Rob by speculating with his savings, right? So it's every sentence you say is only kind of very small point of light in a bigger picture. And it's also very binary. So, we use words that are very absolutist, and you're either one or the other, which in truth, it describes our own minds more than the reality we engage with. And it's also too ambivalent. So, if someone, some designers here might have had this, heard this, the site should be more friendly. What does that mean? It's too ambivalent. Does it mean that the tone should be more friendly? Does it mean that the navigation should be easier to understand? Does it mean that we put a little character in there to be your friend? Does it mean, it could mean any number of different things. And why is the current site not friendly? Maybe we think it is friendly, but someone thinks it's not. So it's the kind of conversation that's really hard to have in words. And this is an old Buddhist story that I like, the story of the blind man and the elephant. But essentially, blind men touching an elephant, one thinks it's a rope, one thinks it's a snake, one thinks it's a spear, one touches the leg, thinks it's a tree, one touches the side, thinks it's a wall. Nobody gets the full picture. And you add to this that the human brain might be the most complex object in the known universe. And each team has a few of those complex entities, complex brains, and we think, oh, that's great. That means we have a lot of thought power, right? But maybe it's not so great. Maybe it's important to remember that most projects fail because of communication issues. So they're not failing because we don't have enough brains. They're failing because the brains don't know how to work together and solve problems together. Great teams, and this the background image, which is hard to parse, is 100 or so people who built the first Mac, so the first general use personal computer. Great teams are smarter than any of their members, right? There's nobody in that team that's smarter than everyone together. That's the mark of a great team. At the same time, dysfunctional teams are often dumber than any one of their members. So you can put a team of professors in a room together and have the team produce worse work than any one of them would do on their own. Why is that? Because they don't know how to collaborate, right? So the quality of conversation is degraded. And this is a part of human nature, right? So humans often talk without listening. We make statements based on partial or zero information. We like to just kind of think out loud, and other people need to know to discount that. Dominant people often take over the conversation, and especially in cultures where we kind of like to respect people in authority, it's really hard to get out of this phase of one person taking over the conversation and everybody essentially just doing what they want, even if every other person in the room has a valuable idea that's more correct, more to the point than the person who's the most dominant. And we also often get sucked into details before the goal is even clear. And this is something I see again and again, especially with engineers, right? So you give them a vague problem and they already start thinking about the database or, how to do certain things. And I want to say, whoa, hold on. Like, we don't even know that that's the right thing to build yet, right? Why don't we talk to a few customers? Or why don't we try some things on paper first, at least, to see if this is even the right thing to build? And so this is a very human kind of thing that we do. We also waste time on semantics. We often misunderstand each other. And we compromise. Or, the way I see this is like we give in. When we compromise in a creative environment, we give in to group pressure, and we give in before actually getting our point across. And even if we're an expert in something, maybe we don't get listened to because everyone else sort of agrees and wants to move on without us. And all of this stuff is super destructive to a new solution. The quality of the conversation dictates the quality of the solution. If you don't know how to have good creative conversations, you don't know how to solve hard problems. You don't know how to create good products. And the worst thing is, oftentimes if you have bad conversations where you're not listening and you don't know how to synthesize information, that leads people to not want to have these conversations. So they check out, so you don't hear from them at all, or they just don't, meetings get canceled and there's no conversation. And at the end, or you just don't invite some experts because you're afraid of what they might say. And the result of that is there's just no solution, because a real solution often requires multiple forms of expertise and to have a real conversation about it. So this is why the sprint is kind of taking hold. It codifies best practices for research, communication, design, and decision-making in a 5-day package. And it allows us to benefit from multiple viewpoints and forms of expertise without getting bogged down in endless meetings and discussions. It allows us to focus the team on a few key strategic challenges that we choose together. So instead of trying to do everything or trying to do too much, we are going to focus, but we're going to focus by talking about everything that we could focus on and only then deciding. How can we align our cross-functional team around a single vision? The sprints really allow us to do this. Provide clear goals and prevent the scope from endlessly shifting. So this is actually has a name in tech, scope creep. When requirements keep changing and the size of the project keep rising. How can we attain real timely data without endless discussions or month-long research efforts? For existing large organizations, there's always this big question: how can we become more innovative without blasting away our existing process? which is how things get done today and how we earn money today. So you can't just blast them away. So how can we do something radically more innovative in a contained way that allows our current processes to continue in the meantime? And so we all know the theory of, maybe most of us know the theory of product design, where, you have an idea, you build something, you launch it, you start collecting data, and then that gives you new ideas for what to improve, and the circle continues. But building often takes longer than that. So we all know that the reality kind of looks like this. And the goal of the sprint is really to go from idea to data as quickly as possible. That's what this is about. And finally, a quote from Yogi Berra: "If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else." I really believe this. So it's, even if you're working agile and you're constantly every 2 weeks releasing a new version and you have a chance to shuffle it, if you don't have a vision of where you want to go, it's going to be much harder. I'm gonna pause for a second. I have like maybe a couple minutes before the actual experiential stuff, but let me see. Some questions. Doesn't it look like waterfall? No, because A, you're only spending a week on the design. B, you're actually testing it after a week. So instead of waiting for the whole first couple of sprints to finish in Agile, you're actually getting feedback from users before you even wrote a single line of code. So, it's different in that sense. And today we can fake it well enough so that the prototype is really, really realistic. So the user gives you really authentic reactions without you having to write a lot of code. Okay, a question from, I don't see the name, Kunika. How do you suggest the division of sprint for a huge project, or maybe in case overlapping tasks? I'm not sure I understand the question here, but I will say sprints are often for huge projects, but they focus on the most critical questions to answer. So that's what allows you to tackle a really big project, but solve really the hardest problem in that project. The problem that kind of everything else kind of falls around it and organizes itself around it. So I hope that helps, but if you want to clarify, let me know in the chat and I can get back to it later. Okay, so super brief history of software development to kind of see how this falls with Agile and other things that you may have heard about or may use. So, in 2001, this book came out, Agile Software Development with Scrum. And it's all about not building something in a vacuum forever, but taking the backlog, the thing you want to build, slicing it into smaller chunks called sprints, and then locking into a single sprint for whether it's a week or 2 weeks or 30 days, and releasing them in chunks. And that allows you to stay agile and keep adapting in between sprints. So this is kind of the beginning of this line of thinking. And 10 years later, 2011, this book came out, which is kind of the new Bible for startups, or it's not that new anymore. But it's all about being lean as a startup and saying your goal as a startup is to figure out what's the right thing to build. It's not to assume that it's to figure it out. And the way you do it is through this build, measure, learn concept that we kind of talked about before. You build the absolutely minimal amount, the minimal viable product. You measure how people respond to it. And then you learn, and that generates ideas for what to do next. So this is the lean process. And essentially every startup, every successful startup essentially works this way. And this is the sprint model, which is, again, it's a shortcut. So you go from idea to learning by shortcutting building, and essentially by faking it, right? We have the tools, we can fake it, so why not use them? It's much cheaper to build a prototype than to build the whole thing. And you might still find at the end when you do the prototype that it's not the right thing to build. So why waste a couple of months building something that you could prototype in a day, put it in people's hands, and learn a lot about what's right. So this is this is the kind of flow, the progress that I see from waterfall to design sprints. And we can refer to it later. I'll talk about a couple of high impact sprints as examples, just to kind of show you the type of examples, and then we kind of can sample, can try to the more practical, the more experiential part. So this is Slack. Slack is one of the biggest success stories in Silicon Valley in recent years. They have changed the way we communicate remotely in companies. It's a chat tool for large organizations, and Slack, when they came to GV, Slack had a problem. They had some growth and people really liked it, but the only people who were signing up were tech companies. So Slack really believed that this could change the way many different companies work, but only tech companies were getting it. We're saying, okay, chat, let's try that, and that, kind of getting the concept of chat. And so GV actually ran a series of sprints with them with the purpose of figuring out what's the right way to explain to non-technical people from non-tech companies the value of Slack as a communication tool. And they ended up, and this is a quote from a different VC talking about what GV did. So in a series of sprints done together, GV prototyped and tested competing approaches to Slack's marketing and onboarding. Slack built and shipped a successful solution in August 2015. And in this quote, they say since then they've tripled their daily active users, but we've seen it's a way more than tripled, right? So they had about 500,000 daily actives at that point, and today they have about 12 million daily actives. And a lot of it is because they cracked the really hard problem of how to explain Slack, which was a very new concept of communicating in chat in channels to non-technical folks. Another completely different one from the world of kind of government is this sprint in Chicago, the City Hall, where their goal was to make city services easier than Starbucks in digital form, where you can access everything, and they were in a design sprint. Another one that I really like is this one from the UN. It's an app called Share the Meal. It's super awesome, friendly app that allows you to find opportunities to pay for the meal of someone in need around the world. So refugee families, and it's very rich and engaging, and works on your emotions and makes you donate. And the goal was to increase UN food donations, and they've done that. Another one is, this is a sprint to help refugees earn more income online, right? So these are NGOs putting together this digital solution to help solve a real problem for refugees who are uprooted and they need to find work. Kenya ran a design sprint on their tax system, how to have a better tax system. So you can sort of see many different types of sprints. And now I have a little bit of a stuckness here with the presentation, so hopefully we will progress in a moment. But you can see sort of what's going on. It's the same process. It's a universal design process, and you can sort of see. It fits many different solutions. So this is from our project. So this is actually at Oxford University, where we sat together with researchers. This is the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford. And we sat with researchers from their institute and from Cambridge, from the Center for the Study of Existential Risk. And we ran a sprint with them to create a strategic kit, like a war game or a role-playing game for decision makers to learn about the potential impacts of AI on businesses, on governments, on civil unrest, on, of course, war and conflict, and all the risks that they had to be aware of, and kind of simulating in a real as possible way the progress of AI in the next few decades. And based on a lot of research and kind of the milestones that real researchers and real AI researchers expect. So this was a treat. And we ran this September of last year, I believe. And then 3 months later, it was already played at the Ministry of Defense in the UK. And so very fast, create something new with many, many different experts, something that works, test it on the final day, and then you can ship it. Cool. So some important features to keep in mind before we dive in. One is it's a very established and respected. This really helps you when you sell it internally. Many great companies are running sprints. So if you're asking for someone to let go of control for 5 days and try this new process, that really helps. It's a short, dedicated time. It helps to kind of get the higher ups all engaged, because all you have to do is, okay, let's do it next month, but let's make sure that we're all free during these days. So it also makes it much more predictable. Everything is time boxed. So I don't know if you noticed this time timer that I have here, but this is, it controls the sprint. It defines the sprint in a really special way. So essentially every minute of the sprint, you are in some sort of time box. You're maybe supposed to be sketching for 45 minutes, or you're supposed to be writing the long-term goal of this project for 15 minutes. So you're all in this time tunnel for the whole week. And it's a really interesting, fun experience, really interesting. It requires a discovery mindset. So even though you can come in very locked in and you think you know what's right, in the first day, we're mostly listening to other people, right? And we're mostly kind of mapping it together with other people. On the second day, we're also seeing everyone else's sketches and drawings and demos. So it really puts you in a discovery mindset, which super improves the quality of decision making. So it includes research, inspiration, and validation exercises, things that many people skip over. And it's 100% focused attention. So we usually say no cell phones, no checking your email on your computer. Keep these things outside. If you really need to pick up the phone or you really need to check your email, please leave the room so that you're not pretending that you're doing an exercise when you're in fact doing something else. It's a really special kind of thing. Most people don't remember when they had this last time. And we work together alone often. So in many of the exercises, we each develop our own ideas before we present them. So we were not just jumping into talking, and that really helps creating a variety of well thought out ideas rather than just one if you let people talk. And we always bring tangible things to the table. So it's always tangible sketches, long-term goal. If we talk about a long-term goal, here, I wrote what the long-term goal I think should be. So you're not talking up in the air or wasting time. And of course, we keep moving. We're making progress. We lock in decisions in time. We're not waiting for perfections. We're not waiting for our anxiety to go away. We keep moving. And the requirements for the sprint are super simple. You can get this at an Office Depot or wherever. I always say the hardest thing to get for a sprint is a room where you're not bothered for 5 days. If you can get that, everything else is pretty easy. Cool. So now I'm gonna check some questions, and then we can start sprinting. We'll do a quick simulation. Okay. So aside from a prototype, what are the other outputs of a design sprint? That's a great question. So first of all, there's a stack of outputs. First of all, you have all the demos that everybody, we not only have the demos, but we wrote what we like about each demo. So that could be 30 different products. We have the recordings of all the user interviews, and we have a feedback board. So we have a wall of how everything was received by every person in a very detailed way. We have answers to the 3 most important key questions that we define on the first day, to make sure whether we want to continue or not, or need to change direction. So So all of these things, in addition to the prototype, it's essentially the prototype plus a whole ton of sketches, ideas, and the feedback on the prototype, which is necessary to take the next step. Do you think there is a danger of innovator bias because sprint is so focused on idea generation and less time on discovery? And do you think you can lose sight of bigger picture? I don't agree with the premise. I think that the whole first day is about discovery. So it's about the same time as you spend on the final prototyping. And in addition, the whole last day is about discovery again, which is you put something in people's hands and you discover what they think of it, whether it works, how they use it, what confuses them. So I would actually define the whole sprint as a discovery process, not not anything else. It's about learning. It's about learning what works. And usually we're pretty lucky. So 70%, 80% of what we did actually is usable, but sometimes it isn't, and we're going to discover it during this week. And again, also it's only 5 days. So next one. Can we apply it to an open challenge rather than a very precise one? Like what new projects and services can we offer? People have tried that. I think you can do a sprint-like workshop for discovering what new products we can offer. The sprint process is all geared towards a single prototype to be tested at the end. So it very quickly narrows it down because it assumes that you're going to come in with some idea on what problem you're trying to solve. So if you don't have that, I would recommend doing a different workshop, and we can talk about it later. There's a couple of good ones, but I wouldn't run a sprint for that. Okay, last question before we dive in. How does the design sprint fit into the agile process? What are the best practices around frequency, etc.? Okay, so I would say, from my experience, a sprint probably gives you enough material for about 3 months of development. And I've seen other people do somewhat similar planning where they run a sprint every quarter. But also, it's not always necessary to run more than one sprint. Sometimes it's enough to run an initial sprint and then go into an agile process where every couple of weeks you do new designs. As long as the designs kind of expand on what you did in the sprint and don't replace what you did in the sprint or enter a brand new territory, you might not need another sprint for a while. Especially if it's a very simple app, you might not need another sprint. So that's my answer. Cool. All right, so let's try running a sprint now. So today we have about an hour to do this. So if we have time for everything, we're going to choose a sprint team. We're going to identify a challenge to run a sprint on. We're going to pick a sprint goal. We're going to get inspired, and we're going to sketch out some ideas. And if we have time, we'll also do a user test at the end. And so how we're going to do all of this in an hour, we're going to simulate it. We're going to fake it, but hopefully in a way that engages you and we get ideas from you into the mix. So let's start. So it's a quarterly board meeting, and we need to choose a sprint challenge. And now there's some questions of what's suitable for a sprint. So first, is it a design problem or a technical problem? And so I always say it's about what to build and are we building the right thing. It's not about how to build and have we solved the problem of how to make it work. So if you come in with a product idea and what you're looking to solve is how to make it technically work, that's not for a sprint. But if you're wondering, is this the right thing to build and how should it look and what's the right flow and etc. and how does it interface with the user, this is for a sprint. Now, is this something that a lone genius can solve, or does it require group effort with multiple perspectives? So definitely group effort. If you have a challenge that a sole genius can do, hire that sole genius, that lone genius, because they're going to be cheaper than a sprint, no matter what. Because a sprint involves multiple people for 5 days, locking in. You're paying users for user tests. It's a big production. So it needs to be a chance to solve a big problem that involves many experts. Is this for a new or existing product? So the sprint was born to be the first week in the life of a new product. That was the initial intention. We run sprints for existing products, and we have a system to do this. In order for it to work, we essentially do a lot of research ahead of time, looking at user feedback, looking at analytics, looking at what's working, what's not working, collecting all of this research in an organized way, and then we bring it into the sprint. But if you don't do that, the sprint itself, as it is, doesn't have the tools to bring all of that knowledge in. It relies on conversations with experts, and they don't necessarily have the list of user requests, right? So you need to do some extra preparation. Is it for a big vision, or all the detailed screens like settings and login and all that stuff? Definitely big vision. We're going to solve a big problem, maybe 10 screens, and we're going to kind of define what it is that we're building, but we're not going to get the login screen, and we're not. There's many deep states that we're not going to get into. Okay, so our challenge today. So this is a new challenge for today, because I thought the previous challenge that we had was not impactful enough, and also I was getting bored of running the same challenge over and over again. So our challenge today is working from home, and we're going to specifically deal with the challenge of someone who has to work from home or doesn't have an office and is finding it difficult. And specifically, what we want is to create a remote alternative to co-working spaces. So we want to have something that feels like a co-working space but that we can kind of enter remotely from home. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to need a volunteer to come up on the air and be the expert. So I'd like for you to, if you're willing to come up on the air and talk about your challenges working from home, and have me interview you and have other people write what you say, let me know. Okay, so I see Tamira. Nice. Okay, so Tamira, I'm going to try to bring you on the screen. Let me see how to do this. And you're going to get a request, and if you can accept it, that will be awesome. In the meantime, it's the pre-sprint chat, and we're gonna have to choose a team. So actually, Tamir, let's wait with this maybe. Let's see, because it seems like okay, awesome. You there? Okay.
Hi.
So Tamir, I'm gonna do this exercise with you, and I'm gonna ask you some questions. So this is the first day of the sprint, and we are choosing a sprint goal, and we're sitting all together, interviewing our experts, and you're going to be that expert, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and can you say something? I just want to make sure that we can hear you.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear it.
You cannot. I don't know what's going on.
Figure it out. If not, we can get someone else. But I'll explain. Oh, people can hear it. Okay. I think I was muted. Okay. Can you say something?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
perfect.
everyone.
Sorry. That's on me. Okay, perfect. I'm glad people chimed in. Because I remember muting my computer and saying that's not going to have any impact on me, right? Okay, so essentially what we're doing is I'm going to interview you, and everybody is going to turn what they're hearing from you into how might we cards. And so essentially the way this works, let me focus on the slide for a second so that people can see. We're going to listen to Tamira as we talk about working from home. And we're going to start by writing in chat HMW, stands for how might we. And then everything that she says, we're going to convert it to, we're going to finish that sentence, turning it into a question. So for instance, if Tamira says, it's really hard not to take a lot of breaks where you're working from home because everything is so convenient, then we're going to write, how might we help people not take breaks when they're working, or take less breaks and be able to focus for longer when they're working from home. So that's the kind of idea, and the goal is for us to create something that's very standard, and also that's phrased in a positive way, in a way that sparks our creativity and makes us ready to start thinking about solutions. So I'm going to bring the focus on Tamira now. And Tamira, tell me about your experience in general working from home. Have you been working remotely all your life, or is this a new experience?
No, this is new. I've been doing this since March.
Okay. And so what's your overall reaction to it? Is it positive? Is it negative?
It's a mix. There are things that I really like about it because I have the flexibility to handle some things that are more personal and about my life and my family. But that also becomes a huge challenge because I get sucked into more of that, and I'm a lot less productive.
Okay, interesting. And so, what are when you said you're less productive? What are the kind of key pain points that you experience when working from home?
Okay. Well, let's see. I have kids. I have multiple kids. And in my case, late high school and entering college. So there's a lot of organizing of their lives and their resources, and the fact that they're both about to study online in, major academic environments. So I can't seem to get myself away from that. Additionally, there's the fact that we're in a pandemic, so everything that comes to the house has to be carefully vetted. No package comes in that hasn't been pre-cleaned, and all the contents are cleaned, and groceries are a huge headache because it takes 2 hours to bring everything in and clean it and wipe it and change its packaging and put it away. So, it's like I have less time to be productive, but I also get disrupted way more. And then there's also a strange expectation from the workplace that because you're at home and all you had to do was roll out of bed and go to your computer, that you're therefore available for this end-to-end string of back-to-back meetings. And there's actually no time to do the work because you're constantly sitting in meetings.
So you actually find that you have more meetings because it's easier to put them on your calendar?
Way more.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So is there anything you miss about working from the office?
Very much so. I really miss the face-to-face interaction. It seems a lot more painful to try to connect with people this way than it did before, because now everything is seeming to be done online. No one actually wants to be on the phone unless they're group calls. So if it's a group call, they are long, numerous, and seemingly, endless, and you can't really focus on anything else while that's happening because they're full screen. So to your point, you can't be half listening and also being productive at the same time. And I just lost your thread. Another issue. I have workmen in the house right now, so that you probably hear it in the background. They're reconstructing a space.
Nice. Yeah, we can hear a little bit something. Cool. No worries. This is real. This is as real as it gets, right? Like you can hear, my house is, I have a highway here and I have a super sensitive mic, so you occasionally hear cars go by. So I think, so this is really interesting. So is there anything else that you missed?
Yeah, let me add something more, and that has to do with eating. So with increased responsibilities to my family, that means that I sort of am put in this centralized role of having to prepare everyone's food.
Amira, I think I kind of lost you. Can everybody still hear Tamira? Is it just me? Okay. So I think that we can capture what Tamira said. I'm going to wrap up that conversation. But I think we heard something about reduce responsibilities to others in the house, right? While working. Cool. So I think that's it. I think that's enough. I think people have written some really great things here, and so this is what the room looks like after a day of interviews. This is from our Oxford sprint, and then we have to start narrowing it down. So we use a sticker system to vote on these how might we's, and each person in the room gets a budget. So let's say I give everyone 7 red stickers, and they can kind of vote. They can spend this budget however they want. They can give something 1 sticker, 2 stickers, 3 stickers, all the way up to all 7. So that's kind of mimics a budget. Very quickly, it creates a heat map of everything that's super interesting to us as a team. And then at the end, there's a decision maker, a decider in the room, and they get special stickers. So they, I give them kind of big green stickers, and they lock in the final 5 challenges, how might we's, that we're going to try to tackle. So let's say that we went through this exercise, because this has to be a simulation, and we voted and we selected these 5. So how might we give the feeling of co-working, but from home? How might we avoid getting lonely when working from home? How might we effectively reduce procrastination at home? How might we improve focus when working at home? And how might we provide some of the benefits of networking that happens at a workplace or at a co-working space, but from home? So let's say that we chose these 5 challenges. This is the first exercise on the first day, and now we have to kind of orient ourselves around the goal for this project. So essentially, the goal, the goal is usually kind of defined as a 1.5 or a 2-year goal. By the way, yes, thank you, Tamir. Sorry, you dropped in the middle, so I didn't get to thank you, but I totally agree. You were awesome. We super sympathize with what you said, and your feedback is, as you can see, we're going to deal with a lot of this stuff in the rest of this event. And I really appreciate you coming up on the air. So we're going to select a 2-year goal, and we're going to try to answer this question when selecting this goal. What does the ideal world look like in 2 years? And we're going to try to be super optimistic. And of course, it has to be related to our product or challenge. So what is our place in the world and in the marketplace and in the lives of our users in 2 years, with a super optimistic mindset? So now I'm going to ask you to write a sprint goal for this sprint, for this remote work sprint. After hearing all the experts, which in this case was just Amira, and you start a sentence, right, in 2 years, and complete the sentence in the most optimistic way that you can. So we have an example on the sprint. In 2 years, it won't matter where you are physically, you'll always be able to experience co-working. So it feels like you're co-working. So I'm going to give you a minute or 2 to write your suggestions. see some people already coming in. In 2 years, you won't be able to tell the difference between working remotely or in an office. That's powerful. I wrote something similar. In 2 years, you're going to feel like you're in the office, even if you can't be. Okay, we have something from Josh. In 2 years, workers will be able to choose when and how much they go into the office. Okay. In 2 years, you'll learn to accommodate and prioritize between work and personal life. In 2 years, you'll have the concept of a secure pop-up office. Really interesting. Great. So you get the point. These are very different. So everybody's writing their own 2-year goal, and they're not identical. And they could produce vastly different products and vastly different companies. And so let's say that we did this exercise again and we voted. So we read everyone's goals, we voted, and then we chose one goal to orient ourselves around. So in 2 years, we'll be the best online alternative to co-working spaces for people working on their own. Okay, so this is the goal. So it's replacing co-working. So it's, not necessarily a perfect office solution for a big company, but it's for someone working on their own that wants to replace co-working with something online. So now we're going to try to find the 3 key questions that we have to figure out, we have to solve during the sprint. And we're going to start with a super pessimistic mindset, saying, okay, now that we have the goal, what can stop us from getting there? And we start this with the words can we, which is us. Can we figure something out? Can we solve a certain problem? Can we? This is the next exercise, right? So start by writing can we, and you can write one or more, and then fill in a question. What could prevent us from achieving our goal, and make it a question. So for example, I wrote an example here. Can we really help parents get work done when their kids are around? Like, is that even possible? Is there any product that can do that? So let's see what you guys write. Yeah. Some really great one. Can we really replace face-to-face interaction with technology? Great question. Can we help employees to keep track of their physical health when working from home? Okay, interesting. Can we really expect companies to organize our lives? No, probably not, right? Can we really do away with all of life's constant interruptions or disruptions? Yeah, those are good questions, right? And so we do this exercise again. Everyone in the room writes 3 of these can we questions, and then we come together and we vote on them. Again, with the red stickers first to create a heat map of what are the most popular questions, and then the final decider puts in the green stickers. And so let's say that we went through this exercise and now we ended up with these 3 questions. Can we prevent a remote co-working solution from feeling awkward and unnatural? So that could be a big concern, right, for this business. Can we create something that will have value even after coronavirus? That's another big question, I think, for someone who's building a product like this now, but they have to future-proof it. Can we convince users to pay for this brand new thing? In a way, this is similar to Slack. It's a brand new experience. Nobody quite knows what it is. Can we convince people to pay for it? And I see the can we questions keep coming. These are great. So the final step is to map the problem out based on all the interviews. And we often do this with the experts as well. And so we're going to sit together and we're going to map out the steps. And it's a fairly rough map, but it needs to lead a user to our desired goal. And so this is the map that we came up with. So we were sitting together, we were sketching this, and we said, okay, so a new user, let's say they Google some work from home problem, like how to not get distracted or how to stay focused or something like that. And then they have to land on our landing page. And then they start a trial session of working from our software. They get connected with existing users that are already in the platform. Then they're working in our virtual space. They have some sort of limited social interactions to get some of the benefits of not working alone. Then the session is finished, and then they see the offer and the pricing for future sessions. And what we want is for them to say, yes, I would book a paid session next. So the price makes sense. This was worth it. I felt more productive. Let me book another session. Okay, so what do we do with this map? So the first thing is we stick our long-term goal and the 3 key questions right next to it. And that helps us orient ourselves and start thinking about where in the map we need to focus. Then we take the key challenges and we kind of try to locate them on the map. So how might we give the feeling of co-working but from home? Okay, so this is somewhere around the working space that we need to create. Okay, next one was, how might we provide some of the networking benefits from home? Okay, so I guess that has to do with the limited social interactions. There has to be some limited social interaction that kind of has some networking benefits. How might we effectively reduce procrastination at home? Okay, so that also falls into the working space experience, whatever that is, right? And so now, we run through this with the whole 5, and now we have a clear sense of where the challenges are. So we finish the day with a red marker circling the moment in the journey that is most crucial for us to test. And in this case, it becomes very clear that our main questions are about the experience itself, the workspace experience itself. How can that feel more real, give us more of the benefits, help us stay focused and be more productive? So instead of worrying about too much of the rest of it, that's probably where we should focus with this sprint. So now Tuesday came in, and Tuesday comes, and our goal is to generate as many divergent ideas as possible. So we start by lightning demos, 3-minute demos of relevant products that solve similar problems in maybe a different industry or a similar industry. So this is us in a sprint researching these different solutions. And remember, our goal is to design a new type of workspace that feels like you're not working alone, even when you're from home. And so for the lightning demos, and this is the next exercise, I want you to think about the problems we chose and the challenges. Write down the name of companies that solve maybe a similar problem in a different industry, or that have something inspiring about them that we can learn from. And just try to write maybe the name of the company and what's so interesting about it for us. So that gives you a sense of the type of lightning demos that we could have. So examples I wrote here are maybe Slack, because they created some sort of online channels that replaced many physical interactions, or the WeWork online community, which is connecting you to other members and to other events and opportunities, even though you're not in the office. I see Tamira wrote Zoom. I think that's right. It's interesting. If you can write why you're making the suggestions you're making. Yep. So I love these suggestions. So Zoom, Mural is another kind of whiteboard that lets you work with other people. Discord I really love. So Discord, we recently did a workshop in Discord. Discord is a tool for gamers to divide into teams and play video games together. But what it does really great is it has these little channels, these audio channels that you can create. So it's like Slack, but with audio. So you can literally move in between conversations very seamlessly. So Discord would be a great demo for something like this. I think virtual events is really interesting. Remo is interesting. I don't know, Hopin, I would love to hear about that. But yeah, Microsoft Teams, Facebook groups, all of these are great demos. And when we do this demo, every person would get 3 minutes to show the actual app and really kind of take us to the right spots and the right screens and show us what's so cool about it and really inspire us. And in addition, we take notes. So we, the wall might have 30 different products, and under each one of them, we kind of write, what's the big idea for this? What are some other things we liked? What didn't we like, if there was something that we really didn't like? And so this is the beginning of really feeding our minds with all of these great examples. Then what follows is a four-step sketch process that takes us from kind of very abstract ideas to one specific idea that we want to present. So we start, and we're not going to do all of this today because we didn't actually do the interviews, but we start by taking notes. So you can imagine the room at this point is covered by many, many, many categories of HMWs from the expert interviews. It has the map. It has the selected goals and questions. It has probably a whole wall of different products we looked at. So the walls are very, very rich with ideas and relevant things. So we start by just walking around with a piece of paper for maybe 20 minutes and writing down everything that seems interesting to us or relevant or that we want to think about more. Then we take another step and we sit down with what we wrote, and we only look at what we wrote, and we start developing ideas from that. So maybe we sketch something, or maybe we write a couple more sentences, start developing some coherent ideas. And then this crazy eights exercise is a very common exercise in UX where you just sketch as many variations as possible of your ideas. So this could be 8 different screens, or the same screen in many different variations, or 2 separate flows. You can experiment, but the point is to do it quickly and kind of very abstractly, not very accurately, so you can explore many different ideas. And finally, we create one full idea. So we give 45 minutes to create one full idea in 3 steps, which is our mini scenario for how we think this test should go. So 3 key steps, 3 key screens in the process. And that needs to explain itself pretty well. And that ends up all hanging up on the wall, and we're going to vote on it the next day. So for this exercise, what I would like is for you to take a piece of paper, if you can, and sketch out one idea that you might have for how this remote co-working solution would work, and take a photo on your phone. And then if you open this link on your phone, bit.ly/PowerSketch, this is essentially a Dropbox file request. So all you have to do is open it, tap the big plus, and you can upload as many photos as you want for your sketches. And we are going to show all of these sketches and discuss them. So this is bit.ly/PowerSketch. We'll take you there. So we'd love to see what you come up with. I also wrote it in the chat, so you can feel free to do this. And then to see once the sketches will be ready, we're going to upload them into this board, which you can find at Remake Labs/sketches. So, but I'm also going to share my screen, so you'll be able to see them through my screen share. Cool. So I'm going to let us give us a little bit of time. I'm going to put on some music and give you something like 7 minutes to sketch something. Hey guys, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so I was giving you a tour of the sketches. Um, it looks like the unmute button is not very sensitive because I hit it to unmute and it didn't take. My bad. I think that essentially what I was talking about, what I was doing is showing you a tour of the sketches. So I think I wasn't really getting most of them, so I don't think you missed much, because essentially what I was saying on many of them is, I'm not sure I get this. I would love for you to explain. But what I was getting is how different these sketches were, right, from each other. So it looks like one of them was for you could see all your teammates, and when they're free, so you could catch them for a quick conversation. That looked like the idea to me. So maybe I missed it. So if you want to elaborate on that, I would love that. The other is, there were a couple that were like just working alongside with someone. So you can do your work, and on the side of the screen, there's someone with you. So that was very different and very interesting. And then there were a couple that I didn't get. And there was one that was all about booking a pop-up office. So it was kind of like booking at a WeWork office, and you get everyone in the same space, and you get food, and it kind of organizes itself. So that's, if I missed anything, if those are your ideas and you want to explain them in the chat, I would love that. But with some of these, I just said, oh, I'm not sure I can see this. I'm not sure I can read this. So I'm happy for everyone whose sketch is on to just explain what they're doing. Explain what they were doing with this, and you can see all of these sketches here. I think essentially the main takeaway from this is not like the ideas themselves necessarily, it's the variety, right? It's how, when you let everyone sketch their own ideas, you come back with very different takes on the same problem. And when you start talking about what works and what doesn't, you have a lot more to work with. And so on Wednesday, we're actually going to start voting on these sketches. So, and then the second part is going to be storyboarding. So when we vote, it's essentially the same type of vote. Maybe say a few words. I'll go back to the slide with the voting. It's the same type of vote. We give everyone a unlimited red stickers. We're creating a heat map of everything that people like and don't like about every one of these. And we do this without talking, before anybody presents their idea. Then we have a structured way of discussing. So I go drawing by drawing, and I kind of name everything that people seem to like about it, and I write it down. And then I say, did anybody vote for this for a different reason? And we write those down if I missed something. And then I say, okay, if you did this, was there anything about this sketch that we missed, some idea that we missed? And so the creator only gets to speak at the end, and they only get to speak if we haven't already named what was cool about it, if we didn't get it. So if we did get it, move on, which is very powerful and saves a lot of time, because usually we do get it. And it also forces us to look at it with fresh eyes and really try to parse these things on our own, like a user would when they would see these screens. But this is really important. Then we start storyboarding the final solution. So what we do is we take the best pieces of it. There's different ways of doing it, but we usually take the best pieces that we all liked and the decider locked in the previous round, and we start combining them into a storyboard. And then there'll be missing screens, or there'll be screens where maybe you want to take two versions that different people did and combine them into something new. So all of these things could work. And this is kind of the most open-ended day. We're actually sketching together, either on a whiteboard all together or on Miro. We actually, you can actually do this fully collaboratively online. You can, Miro now has pretty great wireframing tools for quick wireframes. So You can divide and conquer. If someone seems to get a certain step better, let them take a stab at it. We can also wireframe the same screen together. It works very, very quickly, and you end up with a full story of what the user journey in our test is going to be. Then Thursday is all about building a prototype, which we won't do today. But it's essentially about creating something as realistic as possible, geared towards testing our assumptions. So there's a couple of principles here to remember. The first one is, while we're trying to be as realistic as possible, the requirements of the test are more important. So if we have a question and it's going to be easier to answer if we add one more screen, even if that screen is not as pretty and not as high def as the rest of the screens, that's fine. We're going to do it, because the goal is to answer these questions to the best of our ability, not to design something gorgeous. And you can prototype almost anything. So all of these physical products are results of design sprints. So you just have to be a little bit more clever on how you test it. For instance, with this robot, this was a robot that delivered like a toothbrush to you at a hotel room, or if you forgot something. So you called the reception and they would send this robot. And to test it, they actually used the remote control. It wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing yet, but they could control the robot. They hid around the corner. They brought the robot with a remote control. Then they rang the phone to let them know that the toothbrush is outside, and they opened the door and they would see the robot. So they prototyped the moment of first seeing the robot and people's reactions and people's impressions at that point. And for instance, with these bars, the people who ran this, I believe it's AJ and Smart in Berlin, they did, they tested the wrapper and the shelf experience. So what was inside was not necessarily a real bar; it was parts of other bars, but it tested the moment where the user kind of sees this bar on the shelf next to real other bars in the marketplace, and the thought process that goes in their head. So other prototypes. This is a sprint we did. This is a self-help app with mini courses and self-tracking tools. This is an event management app with a dashboard and reporting and financial reporting, and very sophisticated. And that could work well in a sprint. This is a startup from New York that is linking renters and landlords. It's an app that allows you to pay rent and get rental insurance and protects both sides. This is pretty cool. And then, this is the kit that we designed in Oxford, right? It's like paper and an instruction booklet and like this tech tree and cards. We did this also in 5 days. This is great. So Friday is a full day of user testing. So we book them in advance. Usually we promise like a $50 Amazon gift card or something along these lines. But we target exactly the right category of user. So if it's a general user, that's relatively easy. For like self-help apps, you can essentially go to your co-working space and find a lot of people who would use it. But in many cases, you need more specific people. So we recently had a sprint that needed people who shop online for pharmacy products. So we actually had to recruit these very specific types of people and then run a test with them. So the test is essentially we put the prototype in people's hands, and we let them play with it, and we let them try to accomplish tasks with it, and we learn what works and what doesn't work. And we don't ask too many guiding questions. We're just trying to get them to verbalize what's going on in their heads, what they like, what they don't like, would they use it, how would they use it, etc. And really guide the prototype themselves, drive it themselves. And as I've shown you before, these things can be fully interactive. So it's funny, in my video you see the finger pressing, but in the okay, now you can see it. So essentially this, and we can also do this remotely via Zoom. That happens a lot. You just send them a link to open the prototype and share the screen, and then you sort of get it. So we only have about 5 minutes left from the time, so I think we're going to skip the actual test section, but essentially what we do is we put it in people's hands. We say, okay, you're trying to accomplish this. You landed on this page. Walk me through what you're thinking, and please verbalize your thought. And I try to also make them feel as comfortable as possible. So I always say, we're not judging you at all. We're only judging this product and our design. So please just be as candid as possible. And then we all write positive, negative feedback, everything that they say. And so, as they run through the tests or the software product, we write down everything, and we ended up with a wall that sort of looks like this. So every column here is a person, every row is a feature or a step in the test, and we use color coding. Usually we also have a neutral color, so negative, positive, neutral, informational, and we collect it all. And then for each user, we also try to figure out what are the answers to the 3 key questions. So for instance, our questions here were, can we avoid the solution feeling awkward and unnatural? So if we get a lot of green, that means that we avoided it, we succeeded. People didn't find it awkward or unnatural, they liked it, they said they would use it, something like that. Can we create something that will have value even after Corona? You can kind of nudge them to figure that out, to say, so this is good for you for Corona. Do you think you'd ever use something like this after Corona? And see what they say. So for each one of them, we don't necessarily ask the questions. We try to gauge from their behavior what the answer was and kind of record it. As to all the questions in the chat about copies of the slides, yes, everything is going to be in the community, which is linked below. So everything, the slide, the recording, everything is going to be there. Give me a day to get it together, but it will be there. Okay, so getting started. So actually, I see there's a few questions. So let me before diving into how to get started. A lot of questions about me being muted. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so is the map activity a group facilitated activity or diverge converge? It's a group activity. Usually I, as a facilitator, would just start drawing it based on what I'm hearing, and then maybe I would pause and say, okay, so what's the next step? And then people would yell it out. Usually there's not a lot of arguments around this. Once you get to the map, it usually is pretty clear what the next step is, but someone might jump in and say, hey, you forgot this, and so you add it. And what I like to actually do, recently I started doing this, is I actually create a version of the map before the sprint. And so every interview that I do with an expert, I actually show them the map, get more feedback on it, and it usually gets a little bit complicated with every interview, a little bit more detailed. And then at the end, we all review the map together, and we're asking ourselves, did we miss anything? So it's not that we're doing the map from scratch at the end, which is the way I used to do it. It's I come in with something, even if it's not perfect, and it gets more mature throughout the day. So that's the answer for the map. How would you do a sprint with a remote team? So we do remote sprints on Miro and Zoom. Miro is for all the materials, so you can do. There's sticky notes there. We have a template that we created that we really like. We have sticky notes there. We have all the exercises you can do there. We have like a whiteboard. We have a place for sketches and wireframes. I also let people sketch on paper and just upload the photos or send me the photos via email. And it works quite well, actually. I was surprised because I'm a big proponent of being in person, and I used to fly around the world to do sprints. And I still would once I can, but I was surprised. It works quite well, and there's very robust tools now like Miro which we'll get to in the getting started section. When do you start looking at booking interviews if the challenge is only finalized on day one? That's a great question. Usually, we only start on day two. But in some cases, it's very clear. In many cases, actually, it's very clear on day one who the category of people is going to be. So if we're doing a self-help app, we're looking for people, and it's going to be for the users of that app. Then it's going to be people who use self-help apps or read self-help books and use apps, right? So oftentimes, or if it's for an existing product or an additional product from an existing company, oftentimes we just recruit from their existing users. So sometimes it's clear before, and then we can do it before. Sometimes it's not clear after the end of the first day, which is fine. We have a system in place to start recruiting on the second day, and it doesn't usually take that long to recruit, except in very special cases. Okay, cool. So getting started. So the first thing I would say is definitely read the book. I love this book. Usually in person workshops, I kind of let people browse through it. It's a very nice book. First of all, it's divided into days. It has separators for the days, and each day has all these exercises and sketches. It's just really, really fun. Here, this is the mapping exercise. So I think, I think it's a great start for anyone who's interested if you can just read the book. There's also the book's website is really cool. They have some videos. They have some templates to download. They have some good stuff there. I like it. Tools worth knowing. So these are some of the tools we use during a sprint. I use Figma for the designing and prototyping often, or InVision to complement the prototyping. Miro is what we use for the whiteboard for remote sprints, and Zoom is usually what we use for the interaction, the video interaction with the team. The rest of them, you can Google. Lookback is an interesting tool for user testing, remote user testing. And I think the rest of them are just other prototyping tools or other design tools. We also, this is our new community, really brand new, still in alpha. I actually still have some planning meetings with some great designers on how to move this forward and what content we want to add to it and what kind of events we want to do regularly as part of this community. But the title is going to be, it's an impact design community. It's people who are interested in design for change and design for impact, whether in just NGOs and social organizations, governments, but also in businesses that want to change the world or do something good for the world. And I'm very focused on design sprints, so design sprints are going to be a big part of it, but there's also going to be design thinking and system thinking and many other innovation tools. And so the goal was to charge for it, but for anyone who's through this event joining the community, it's going to be $0 for the foreseeable future until at least a year, until it's so amazing that we feel like we have to charge for it. But for now, everyone who gets in is kind of gets in for free. So the green button below will take you there. We also have a new podcast. There's 3 episodes out. It's called the Remake Podcast. You're welcome to try it. And we do boot camps. So we do private boot camps for companies, for the right teams, up to 30 people. And we do occasionally public boot camps. All of these things are going to be in the community when we market them. We're also working on a course that's going to be part of the community, and actually many other courses. I have a starter kit that's almost ready. It's going to be part of this community with all the templates and all the documents that we use in our sprints that you can purchase. So all of this stuff the community is a great place to be for that. It's a Medium article that I wrote that was got pretty good responses from the design community. So I recommend reading it if you kind of are interested to know why I'm so passionate about sprints beyond what I said so far. These are the less obvious ways the sprints can make a difference. This is from an article we wrote for investors. We also did a webinar for VCs and angels recently. Other things like our innovation plan. And yeah, this is not really relevant anymore, except that we are still talking to Jake about doing a boot camp. He was supposed to come to Israel probably in April, and Corona canceled everything. But the link is still live if you are interested in what we're going to do with Jake at some point. I'm going to stay as long as I need to answer any questions. I see there's a couple of new ones. Let's see what we can do here. And let's see, hopefully not all of them are about me not being audible. So let's see. Okay, so okay, how expensive are Remake Labs design sprints? Is this something you're able to answer? Okay, so Tamira, I'll answer that. I'll answer that in person. We have a different price sheet for every country, but they're not the cheapest thing that you can get, but also not the most expensive thing that you can get for your company, and they are radically transformative. So I think that they're priced according to their value. Okay. I'm on a cell phone and can't see the green button you mentioned. Will you email? So Justine, I'm just going to post the link to the community in the chat. So hopefully you can see the chat. So it's community.remakelabs.com. And thanks everybody who has to go. I understand we're already past time. Okay, someone is asking. Might be a silly question, but is it possible to do a design sprint with less than 3 people? Okay, so I think it is possible to do a design sprint with less than 3 people. In fact, I've done a design sprint with just myself, but I was the decider, the facilitator, and I was also running it on my own business. So I essentially kind of ran along some of the exercises to make sure that I hit all the important steps. I wouldn't necessarily recommend paying a lot of money to do a sprint with less than 3 people. Get the right experts, get your friends who know something about your industry, and try to increase the number of people, because the more perspective, the better. Okay, and I see actually there's still a couple more. Okay. Are there any situations where design sprints are harder to do or will provide less value? I would say, yeah, whenever, I don't know if they're harder to do, but whenever the value or the appetite for change is relatively low compared to the cost of a sprint and how many people will get involved, etc., then it's not worth it. It's not for small features. It's not for one-offs. It's for a big new project or a big change. So in those cases, I would say run a sprint. And I already said, I think it's not for technical problems. It's not for can we figure out a technical problem. It's not for, it's only for things that you can test. So there's something that you can prototype fairly well within a day and actually give people a realistic experience of the final product, so you can get authentic reactions from them. So if you cannot imagine what a prototype for this would be, then it's probably not a perfect match for a sprint. Mika asks, what's the difference between design sprints and design thinking? So the difference is, there's not much of a difference. Design thinking, it's kind of like the science of cooking, right? It's like all of these many different tools and many different ways of thought and different tools for research and different tools for prototyping and many different exercises and workshop types. Design sprints are a very specific 5-day recipe. Some people have shortened it to 4 days. I personally don't recommend it, especially for complex projects. But it's an application of design thinking. Every one of the steps in design thinking is a whole day in the sprint, but it's a specific recipe with specific results, and it's often very concrete. And you actually get something. You get a prototype that feels real, and you get a lot of clarity. So that's the prototyping in 5 days is something that's pretty unique. How do you set people's expectations regarding the final output of the design sprint so that they don't think it will answer all their questions and be the final design? David, that's a great question. I actually make them sign a contract that says that. So I have a whole expectation management in my agreement, and I make them read it. It says the nature of the sprint process, and it says, the purpose is learning. The prototype is going to be limited to 10 screens or around 10 screens. We kind of explain everything, and I explain it ahead of time. And I do think one way to say this is it will make a vast difference in how you think and understand your own product, in the clarity of what you need to build, but it's not the final assets that you need to start coding necessarily, because the test could on the final day could correct many of your assumptions, so you could end up needing to make quite a few changes. So thanks, David, for that question. Amir is asking about the advantage of using Crowdcast versus Zoom. I would just say that the chat in Zoom kind of sucks, and the chat in Crowdcast, people engage a lot more via chat. And also the questions, asking a questions feature is really useful in Crowdcast. Other than, and also I find it very distracting to see 100 people in their pajamas at home or whatever, or yelling at their children. Like I almost prefer like that. You're safe. You're just in chat. Do whatever you want. You can you can cook while listening to this. I don't care, and I can still interact with you via chat. So that's my take. Okay, cool. So thanks everyone. I hope this was educational. We're gonna have a lot more stuff in the community. We already have some stuff, but a lot more is coming. It's going to explode with different courses and webinars and documents and templates you can download and all that stuff. So so keep in touch, and and thank you so much for taking the time. And I'll see you around in the community.